Today we're going to be comparing specs of 4 different mirrorless cameras that I feel are the best mirrorless cameras available on the market. And hopefully I'm going to give you guys enough information to help you to determine which camera is right for you. We're going to be taking a look at the Sony A7S III, the Canon R5, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, and the Panasonic S1H. 4 cameras, but only one can win. Let's check it out. As a quick disclaimer, even though all these cameras with the exception of the Pocket 6K are what's known as hybrid cameras, meaning they are capable of both photo and video, I will be focusing mainly on the video-centric features of these cameras because I am a video guy. Therefore, I've done all my research comparing mainly the video features of these cameras, and our comparison today will also be judged based on those video-centric features. So for our first comparison, we're going to be taking a look at sensor size. Now I know that there's a lot of debate out there on whether or not sensor size does matter when it comes to things like depth of field, but let's be real. There's a big difference between something like a micro four thirds sensor and say a medium or a large format sensor when it comes to depth of field, so obviously sensor size does matter. Plus, I think it's a valid comparison because it takes more processing power to read what's coming off of a larger sensor versus a smaller one. So, for our comparison, the A7S III has a full frame sensor, the Canon R5 has a full frame sensor, the Pocket 6K has a Super 35 sensor, and the Panasonic S1H has a full frame sensor. So all but the Pocket 6K get a point for this one. Next, we're going to be taking a look at megapixels. Now, I know I said that this is going to be more of a video-centric comparison, and megapixels are usually something that's more important when it comes to photography, but I do think that this is still a valid comparison when it comes to these cameras. So, the A7S III has a 12 megapixel sensor, the Canon R5 has a 45 megapixel sensor, the Pocket 6K has a 21.2 megapixel sensor, and the Panasonic S1H has a 24.2 megapixel sensor. So the Canon R5 takes the point for this one. Now let's compare maximum resolutions of these cameras. The Sony A7S III can put out 4K, where the Canon R5 can put out 8K, and the Pocket 6K and the S1H can both put out 6K. So the Canon R5 takes the point for this one, but I am going to give a half a point to both the Pocket 6K and the S1H because 6K is still very new in the mirrorless world. Next, we're going to be comparing max frames per second. Now this one's a little bit tricky because each one of these cameras can produce a different maximum resolution. So I felt it fair to go with something that is equal across the board and also a resolution that I feel is important to most people today, which is 4K. Also, because it's still difficult for a lot of computers to process things like 6K and 8K. The Sony is capable of 120 frames per second in 4K as well as the R5, where both the Pocket 6K and the S1H are only capable of 60 frames per second. So Sony and Canon both get a point for this one. Now we're going to compare crop factors when it comes to those maximum frames per second in 4K. Crop factor is very important to a lot of people because it doesn't matter if you can shoot 1,000 frames per second if it's going to crop in 300% to get there. The A7S III has a 1.1 times crop in 4K 120, where the Canon R5 has no crop. As a matter of fact, it doesn't have any crop in any resolution. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K has a 1.69 crop, but we do have to keep in mind that it starts out with a 1.558 crop because it's a Super 35 sensor to begin with. The Panasonic S1H has a 1.5 or APS-C size crop in 4K 60. So the Canon R5 takes the point for this one, but I'm also going to give a half a point to the Sony A7S III because it only has a 1.1 times crop at 120 frames per second in 4K. Now let's take a look at the LCD screen on each one of these cameras. The Sony A7S III has a 3-inch 1.44 million dot touchscreen LCD, while the Canon R5 has a 3.2-inch 2.1 million dot touchscreen LCD. The Pocket 6K has a 5-inch 1080p which isn't even measured in dots, but if you wanted to put it in dots, it's 6.3 million dot touchscreen LCD, where the Panasonic S1H has a 3.2 inch 2.3 million dot touchscreen LCD. So the Blackmagic Pocket 6K takes the point for this one. Now that we've compared screen size and resolution, let's compare whether or not these cameras have flip screens. The Sony A7S III and the R5 both have flip screens. The Pocket 6K doesn't have a tilt or flip screen, where the S1H has both a tilting and a flip screen. So the S1H takes the point for this one. Since we've compared LCD screens of each one of these cameras, now let's see which cameras have a top screen on them. The A7S III does not have a top screen, neither does the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, but both the R5 and the S1H have top screens, so both the R5 and the S1H get a point for this one. Now let's compare EVF resolution. The Sony A7S III has an all-new 9.44 million dot EVF, while both the R5 and the S1H have 5.76 million dot EVFs, and the Pocket 6K doesn't even have one. So the point goes to the A7S III for this one. Now let's take a look at inputs and outputs of these cameras, since those are important features for filmmakers. The A7S III has a full-size HDMI and 3.5mm headphone and microphone jacks, while the Canon R5 has a micro HDMI and 3.5mm headphone and microphone jacks, while the Pocket 6K has full-size HDMI, mini XLR, 3.5mm headphone and microphone jacks, and can also receive timecode through one of those 3.5mm jacks, where the Panasonic S1H has full-size HDMI, 3.5mm headphone and microphone jacks, as well as a synchro port that can also receive timecode. So the point goes to the Pocket 6K for this one, but I'm also going to take a point away from the R5 for using a micro HDMI on an 8K camera in 2020. Now let's compare storage options. The Sony A7S III has dual CF Express Type A and SD card slots, while the Canon R5 has a CF Express Type B slot and an SD card slot, where the Blackmagic Pocket 6K can take a CFast and SD, but can also record to SSD through USB Type C. The S1H has dual SD card slots. So the point goes to the A7S III for flexibility, but I'm also going to give a point to the Blackmagic Pocket 6K because it can record to SSD, which is the cheapest price per gigabyte alternative out there. Now let's compare the RAW capabilities of each of these cameras. The Sony A7S III advertises 16-bit linear RAW, which sounds like a high number but can be a little bit misleading because it does it through HDMI and it's going to get compressed down to 12-bit log RAW just like most of the other cameras. The R5 and the Pocket 6K both record 12-bit RAW internally, where the S1H also does 12-bit RAW through HDMI like the A7S III. So the point goes to the R5 and the Pocket 6K because both those cameras can record RAW internally. Since mirrorless cameras are likely to be used by run-and-gun style filmmakers, in-body stabilization is very important to filmmakers these days. So let's look at the stabilization capabilities of each of these cameras. The Sony A7S III offers 5.5 stops of stabilization when used with a stabilized lens, where the R5 offers up to 8 stops of stabilization when used with a stabilized lens. The Pocket 6K does not have in-body stabilization, and the S1H offers up to 6 stops of stabilization when used with a stabilized lens. So the point goes to the R5 for having the highest stops of stabilization. Autofocus has become much more important to many filmmakers these days, as it has become much more reliable over the years and is practically expected out of modern-day mirrorless cameras. The Sony A7S III offers phase detect autofocus, while Canon's R5 offers its dual pixel autofocus. The Panasonic S1H offers DFD autofocus, and the Pocket 6K does not offer any type of continuous autofocus. But the point goes to the A7S III, as it has proven to be the most reliable and accurate autofocus of them all. Now let's look at lens selection for each of these systems. To perform this comparison, I simply went on B&H's website, looked up the different mounts to see exactly how many lenses are available in each of those mounts. The Sony E mount offers 264 lenses, while the Canon RF mount offers 39. The Blackmagic Pocket 6K uses Canon's EF glass, offers 235 lenses, and the Panasonic L mount offers 58 lenses. So the point goes to Sony for this one. Now let's look at overheating issues, since nobody wants a client sitting on the sidelines waiting for a camera to cool down to finish a shoot. The Panasonic S1H offers one of the best-in-class cooling systems that is also weather sealed, and I've heard no reports of overheating issues even when shooting for long periods of time. The Pocket 6K also offers a very solid cooling system, where the Canon R5 has been openly reported by Canon to have overheating issues and will stop for long periods of time and can only shoot in short bursts before overheating. Sony has claimed that the A7S III has no overheating concerns, although a few reports have already come in online of overheating issues, although it has been in higher temperatures and is not so severe as Canon's R5. Rather than giving a point to any of these for not overheating, because a camera should not overheat, I'm going to take away 2 points from Canon's R5 for its extreme overheating condition. As we get closer to the end of our comparison, let's take a look at battery life. This one was also a bit difficult to judge because most manufacturers don't give their battery ratings in run times, but rather they give it in shots, as in photo shots. So we're going to take those numbers as well as the overall battery size and judge from there. The Sony A7S III offers 600 shots and a 2280 milliamp hour battery, where the Canon R5 offers 490 shots in its power saving mode at 2130 milliamp hours. Now, Blackmagic doesn't give any kind of rating, and everybody pretty much knows that their battery life is horrible. The Panasonic S1H offers 400 shots using the LCD, 380 shots using the EVF, and 1,150 shots in power saving mode, and offers a 3100 milliamp hour battery. So the point goes to Panasonic for the largest battery and the most shots available. So now let's compare price. The Sony A7S III comes in at $3,498, while the Canon R5 comes in at $3,899. The Blackmagic Pocket 6K comes in at $1,995, while the Panasonic S1H comes in at $3,997. So the point goes to the Blackmagic Pocket 6K because it is by far the cheapest camera, almost half the price of the rest, but yet is still a very capable 6K camera. Now that we've gone through all the comparisons, I'm going to add 1 point to the Panasonic S1H because out of all 4 cameras, the S1H is the only one to offer video-centric features like waveforms, vector scopes, luminance meters, and is the only Netflix-approved cameras out of all 4. But still, even after adding the 1 point to the Panasonic S1H, the Sony A7S III is the clear winner. So that's it for my comparison on these cameras. I think all of them are amazing cameras, and I think people are a little bit harsh on the R5, as really I think it's more of a photo camera rather than a video camera. But I still don't like the overheating issues. That's pretty much it for today's video. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope this gave you enough information to help you to determine which camera is right for you. If you have any kind of questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section below. I love to engage with you guys. I love to be a help if I can. And if you did find this helpful, please hit that thumbs up, as it definitely helps both this video and this channel out. And if you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell for notifications. I'm really trying to do something with this channel, so any kind of help that you guys can give is much appreciated. But that's pretty much it. I hope to see you guys on the next video. Thanks for stopping by.